Now, I do want to talk about the Molly K. Macauley Award for just a moment. And the person who really managed that is Gail Allen. Gail, when she retired from NASA, she was the chief scientist. Well, she'll say she was the acting chief scientist for a couple of years. But I call her the chief scientist. And she's also the AAS VP of Education. So she runs all of our educational programs. And one of the things that she does manage is this effort for the Molly K. Macauley Award. Now, it's rigorous getting into this. They put out a fairly wide-ranging call for abstracts. A large number sometimes of students put in abstracts. Those abstracts go through a selection committee. The committee selects folks to provide papers and presentations. The top 5 in 2 different categories are picked to come and to provide a presentation to the committee. And then we pick the top 5 in each, and with a winner in each. The 2 tracks that we use are business and space policy and science and engineering. We heard one of our presenters day before yesterday, and now we have our second presenter today. And I'd like to turn it over to Al Tordos, who's the Vice President of Space Infrastructure and Civil Space at Maxar. Al?
Great, thank you, and good morning, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Al Tadros. I'm Vice President for the Civil Space Business at Maxar Technologies. I'm very excited to introduce Woon Lee from Georgia Tech, who is the Business and Space Policy track winner for the Macauley Award. Hang's topic on the business case for LEO Constellations is a very timely and exciting topic that you'll hear about here shortly. A little bit about Maxar. Maxar is a trusted partner and innovator in Earth intelligence and space infrastructure. We provide spacecraft robotics, Earth intelligence, geospatial data and insight to government and commercial customers. We trace our proud history in space exploration back to the first moon landings, where we built the Mission Control Center for the Apollo missions. Now we are extending that legacy to NASA's Artemis program, where we are proud to be developing the lunar orbiting power and propulsion element with our partner NASA Glenn, as well as supporting Dynetics in building a human landing system. And we are building a robotic arm that will further study the lunar regolith. Maxar is very proud to be sponsoring 10 student registrations to attend this important Glenn Memorial Symposium and supporting the Macauley Awards. Congratulations again to Woon Lee, and now we'll hear from him.
Well, thank you very much for the introduction. My name is Woon Lee, currently a PhD student studying aerospace engineering at Georgia Institute of Technology. First of all, I'd like to express my gratitude to the American Astronaut Society for providing me an opportunity to present my work. Do we have the slides ready?
Your slides are up and running.
Yes, could we go to the, yes. So I'd like to open up this presentation by introducing a story of OneWeb. OneWeb is a late-stage venture in the space-based communications industry that aims to provide ubiquitous broadband services around the globe. As one of the pioneers of the recent mega constellation trend, OneWeb has raised about $3.4 billion of the forward funding rounds, mainly backed up by the SoftBank groups. However, back in March, OneWeb filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy after failing to attract additional fundings. Some external experts point out that the firm will require $7.5 billion to complete the 600 satellite configuration under the ideal setting. Similar story extends to LeoSat, which was announced the operational shutdown just several months ago due to a lack of investors. All of this raises the question concerning the sustainability of ventures in the space-based communications market. Moving on to the next slide. Can we go to the next slide? Yes. The question I'd like to ask is, why is the market hostile to ventures? To answer this question, it is important that we first identify various types of challenges that reside in the market. The LEO constellation market has high entry barriers, requiring high upfront capital investments. The cost of entering the market is the major barrier that discourages entrepreneurship in this sector, and is a core cause of the numerous venture failures over the last 2 decades. As shown on the right, The expected capex by firms in this industry is in the order of billions of dollars. Not only the cost of deterministic factors are high, but also the cost of economic cost of uncertain factors are significant. Here, the uncertain factors span both the time cost and the financial cost incurred due to unexpected mission delays and anomalies. The space-based communications industry is characterized as a highly volatile and unpredictable market. The market's demand is driven by the need for communication services in areas where terrestrial networks are yet to be reached or cannot reach. Given this background, experts view the relationship between LEO constellations and terrestrial networks as the love-hate relationship, of which they compete and complement each other in various ways. Continuing on the next slide, a recent resolution by the ITU during the WRC-19 mandates that in order for NGSO systems to maintain their radio frequency spectrum allocations, they'll need to launch 50% of the planned configuration within 5 years and 100% within 7 years. The newly resolved milestone-based approach is an attempt to prevent frequency warehousing and to enforce the early determination of spectrum priority rights by incapable holders. However, under the uncertainty in the production and the launch of satellites, maintaining the pace with the milestones can be a daunting task for ventures. At the same time, it can significantly discourage VCs from investing in ventures with little to no credibility. There are, of course, there are other various technical challenges as well. Among them, the space debris issue is directly related to the scale of a constellation system. A constellation vendor must be aware of both the system's contribution to the space environment and the space environment's impact on the system. The space debris concerns also call for several policy recommendations that could further strictly regulate ventures in operating their constellation systems. Next slide. Many of these challenges are directly related to the scale system. The larger the system, the more difficult the challenges they become. Nonetheless, most of the planned or operational systems are global coverage constellations that make these systems susceptible to various market challenges. There are, of course, other types of business models that exist in the market. For instance, there are ventures focusing on the low end of the market using CubeSats. While their systems cost significantly less than those of mega constellations, they're limited to low throughput services. They're often intermittent in service coverage. Moving on to the next slide, it is important to note that many players in the market design their systems using symmetrical constellation design methods. However, symmetrical constellations are not ideal as the demand for communication services is not uniformly distributed around the globe. In response to this background, the question of interest I would like to address is as follows. Is there any affordable and sustainable business model that can be adopted by resource-constrained ventures other than CubeSat business models? To this end, I've been exploring the topic of regional constellations. Next slide. A regional constellation is a system that provides desired coverage of a bounded region of interest. The most classical form of a regional constellation is the geosatellite system. The geosatellite systems offer a remarkable coverage performance over a locally bounded area, granting persistent communication services only with a handful amount of satellites. Given this advantage, the geo regime has been a competitive over real estate for many fixed satellite telecommunication service providers. On the other hand, there are many attributes that geo systems fall short compared to NGSO systems, namely latency, launch cost, and satellite sizing. The NGSO regime brings several benefits to stakeholders through the provision of low latency communications and the utilization of small satellites that further enable VSAT or IoT, low power wide area network type of services that are otherwise unfavorable from GEO. So given this clear trade-off between GEO and NGSO systems, I identified a particular constellation type, an NGSO regional constellation, that could benefit from both of these attributes. So what exactly are NGSO regional constellations? To answer this, we need to step back and need to examine from the fundamentals of engineering. The goal of satellite constellation design optimization is to minimize the number of satellites while satisfying the mission requirements. In general, the streets of coverage method and Walker constellation design patterns have been the de facto standard in the present space-based industry. These design methods are built upon one common design principle, that all satellites are symmetrically distributed in space, and which are shown to be effective approaches for the global coverage constellation designs. Next slide. However, using these conventional systems is overachieving for regional coverage purposes due to symmetry. And this is the part where my latest work comes into play. By breaking the symmetry, my research has shown that one can design a satellite constellation that is solely dedicated to a region of interest while minimizing the number of satellites. The figure here shows a simple comparison between the conventional method and the dedicated regional constellation. Next slide. There are multiple technical attributes associated with the NGSO regional constellations. Among them, the low cost is one of the key attributes. Technically speaking, the cost reduction is achieved at the cost of giving up on the coverage of areas of no interest. To quantify how regional constellations cost compared to global constellations, I did a simple high-level analysis. Under the same LEO set over parameters, providing coverage over only continental United States or India, one can observe 26% or 40% reduction in the number of satellites, respectively. It is important to note that the cost for the reduction is not a sacrifice nor an incurred cost, but rather the true cost of a constellation system dedicated to a particular area. Next slide, please. Several potential business strategic implications are deduced based on the technical attributes of NGSO regional constellations. First, regional constellations could enable ventures to enter the market with lower capital investments. Ventures can focus on the service of a region with a high revenue potential and or low risk, thereby minimizing unnecessary capex. Regional constellations can increase managerial flexibility, allowing ventures to swiftly react to market uncertainties. One of the lessons learned from the legacy projects was the importance of re-options. While many players in the present market are engaging in some form of re-option strategy, for example, stage deployment, many are restricted to providing initial services over polar regions due to the physics of global coverage constellations. On the other hand, a regional constellation can increase the value of the option to expand itself in the context of re-option strategy, suggesting regional to regional, or perhaps the global stage deployment instead of global to global. And continuing on the next slide, regional constellations are versatile platforms that do not necessarily sacrifice satellite hardware specifications. Integrating with the CubeSat business models may help further reduce the capex or even create a new business opportunity for ventures. And regional constellations can be either standalone or augmentation systems. And they possess several managerial features that further enhance the utility of regional constellations. And moving on to the last slide, well, in conclusion, the space-based communications industry is characterized as a market with high barriers to entry and unpredictable demand. Most of the planned or operational communication constellations are for global coverage. In this presentation, I have introduced the concept of a regional constellation and its application as an alternative business solution that can be adopted by a resource-constrained entrant of the market to overcome their liabilities of newness. The one important remark I'd like you to take away from this presentation is that how we distribute satellites in space dictates the economic value of a system. This concludes my presentation. Thank you very much for your time.
Very nice, Woon. I really appreciate this. We do have one question.
Yes.
And that is about ground terminals.
Yes.
Can you discuss availability of ground terminals and whether the cost of the ground terminal development can be borne by the target markets?
Well, so I think this answer to this question will be dependent on the type of services a firm is trying to provide. If they're if this is a constellation that is standalone, does not integrate with the other the communication, the internet protocols, I believe that the ground stations can be positioned only on the areas of interest. But if this is if a regional constellation were to be integrated with the internet protocols or other types of communication networks, I think this calls for the inter-satellite link capabilities And then it also calls for several the ground terminals in the areas where you're not actually interested in to provide a secondary service. I think this is currently how I speculate the ground terminal is going to be.
Thank you very much. We appreciate you applying for the Monty McGuire, and we congratulate you on your selection. And we
Thank you
look
very
forward to
much.
seeing you at the next conference.
Yes, thank you very much for your time.